Who here's used custom? They're called CSS custom properties. Who's used them? Okay, 2, 3, okay, 4, okay. So some people. I'm guessing the rest of you haven't. Otherwise, you wouldn't have not raised your hand when I asked if you had. So, safe to say, most of us haven't used them, okay? So I'm going to kind of show them off, and then we're going to talk about why they're awesome, and then we're going to talk about why they suck, and I'm going to talk about what I did to make them awesome again, okay? That sounds crazy. I had a philosophy class like this in college, but I promise it works, okay? All right. Okay, so when let's just open up our styles file. So I just made a brand new app real quick. So this is a fresh app. If we go to the browse and we just go here, I mean it's just this it's just the default app that happens when you do a new app in the CLI, right? There's nothing special about this app. So in here, if we go to styles, now I'm going to show you how you make custom CSS properties, but I'm going to call them CSS variables, okay? Because I don't like to call them custom CSS properties. So we're going to call them custom. So you do this thing called root. I don't know what that means, but you do this, okay? It's for in case you're using shadow DOM or DOM encapsulation. So I lied. I do kind of know what it means, but I don't know why I called it root. But you make a thing called root, and then in here you can do things like, and then there's like a naming convention for custom CSS variables. So you can do like color. Well, give me color, someone. Red, dude. Is that a color? We're doing cinnamon because red. Is that? Did I spell it right?
No, cinnamon or
salmon? Oh, I can't. I didn't hear it. Good call. Thank you. Thank you for participating in my talk. All right. So we just made our first CSS variable. All right. That's pretty cool, right? So how do we use these things? Well, I can say any anchor tag in my app, I want the color of that to be var color. Okay. That's pretty easy, right? And everyone here is like, yeah, dude, literally we've all used Sass. Everyone's used Sass. Like no one's impressed by what I just did, true? Like it's not that impressive. There's a couple things that are cool about this. So one, there's no build step involved. Okay? So this just happens in the browser. You just get it. And then in Angular, there's another cool step involved, okay? And let me show it to you. In Angular, who here uses Sass with Angular? Or less with Angular? Okay, so most people, yeah. When you have a Sass variable, like let's say you have a Sass variable called $color or color $. I don't know. You know your company better than me. And it's salmon, okay? Because we're super imaginative. And you want to use that in your Angular component. Because your app is themed salmon. Yeah? So how do you use that in your Angular component? Does anyone know?
You have to import it. Right? You import it into your Sass file. Is that what you're referring to?
Okay. Yeah, you can't really import Sass files into your Angular file, can you?
Not in your Angular file, no.
Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in your Angular component, you have a styles thing or style URLs thing. How do you use it in that style?
Using Less or Sass or anything?
Yeah.
Oh, you would just use an import and then reference the file itself to grab the variables that are available in Less anyway.
Can you do that? Can you reference like .less
yeah.
files?
I'm sure I've seen it before anyway.
I don't do that. So I like my styles inline and my templates inline. And that's probably like, some people are like, think that's sick. But I just like it inline. It's a little bit more how components are being built these days, like especially in other frameworks, Vue, React, Angulars are in it the same way. So I jump out into my angular.json and I set those to true by default so that every component I generate has inline styles and inline templates. So when you have inline styles, you don't really get less or Sass on those things. So you don't have access to those variables. So if you want to use it in there, you have to copy it, right? So if you ever want to change from salmon to like fuchsia, it's a lot of find and replace, right? And it's not very efficient. But with custom CSS properties, you have your global properties file, right? Like I have this salmon out here. And if I go into my angular component, sorry. I go to my component. So hold on, I'm gonna go back into the style CSS. I'm just gonna delete this style, just so that the color goes back to blue. Yeah. Now we're gonna go in here and in my component, we're going to change this to styles, right? And we're gonna say a color is var color, right? So you can consume these things because they're global variables, right? And they just exist in the browser. And when you inspect your element, you look at like what the color is, and it's like it's var color, right? So it's referencing it, and then it makes adding multiple themes to your app easier because you just have to swap out the theme file, and like it makes a lot of things easier to do it this way. So this is how you use CSS variables. So it takes away a compile time step. Lets you have a lot of the same flexibility. I'm a pretty big fan of them. Does anyone know why they don't work? I mean, everyone should guess this. It's like why everything in the web doesn't work. Someone said it? Yeah. So Edge supports them, right? Edge 15 and up supports them. But which now Edge 15 up, that's like 3 or 4 versions old. So like we're good on Edge. It's IE 11, 10, and 9. Most people still have to do 11. Some people have to do 10. Raise your hand if you're 10. 9. Raise your hand if you're 9. 9. Oh, geez. Okay. So what we got is we want to use cool stuff, but we're limited by what we can do, right? We've all done this. We've all used jQuery and MooTools because the browser sucks too, right? Like we all come from where this is like a normal thing. So I built this thing that allows you to build with custom variables, and it has a graceful degradation stage for if you're in IE 11, 9, 10. I suppose this will work in 8, to be honest. I haven't even tried it, but it should work in 8. It's going to go ahead and it's going to fix this for you. So let me show you what's happening here, okay? Because I think it's pretty cool. If I lose someone, there's going to be lots of questions here. So I hope that lack of slides and everything, you guys can fill in with questions. And like we co-op on this presentation, okay? So I'm gonna try and walk you through what I did, and it's going to get polished in the next few days. It just barely started working, literally long enough for me to like throw clothes on and drive here. Like so, it's like raw, but it works, yeah. So, but let me show you what happens. Okay. So one last thing before I move on, if I come over to this virtual box and I refresh the page. Oh yeah, sorry. There's a couple things you got to do to make your app work. Yeah, so you got to go over here. You got to say, hey, make my bundle size way bigger. And then the app works. Cool. All right. Didn't work here though, right? So it worked in Chrome. We can see that on the left. Doesn't work on the right. So that's the problem. So I was like, I can fix this. And I can make it so that we have this graceful degradation that's invisible to the developer. All they would need to do is bring in one module, and they don't even have to configure the module. They just have to bring it in. So that'd be pretty simple, right? If someone could offer you, all you got to do is bring in a module and put that in your app module and just say import custom vars module, that would be pretty legit, right? I thought it would be anyway, so sorry, I might be putting words in your mouth. But anyways, that's what I built. So, let's go spelunking and talk about how this works. Okay, so this is the old project. So I'm going to close this. Let's cancel the serve real quick. Okay, so here's the new project. So we've got our app component, right? Everyone knows this app component. It's the same app component that it created in the other project, right? And it's got our app.html. It's the same exact project. Sans, I added this new module that didn't used to be there, okay? So this is the only difference. Now, I'm gonna kind of walk you through some things. I added a bunch of crazy CSS because I wanted to make sure this thing wasn't gonna die. I wanted to make sure this thing like works, okay? So excuse this whole line of crap here because I wasn't trying to like vomit on my presentation. I was just trying to make sure that this code would even work. So that's all this is, okay? And really the only important part of this whole file is this piece right here, okay? We're just trying to get it to go through that whole file, and what we're going to tell it to do, what I told it to do, and if this doesn't make sense, I need you guys to tell me before I like float this out to the general Angular community. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, when the app loads, take the link, the style tag in the header, and scan it for variables. And if you see any variables in there, just register them in a map. And then every component that registers, you know that styles URL property that like takes styles? I actually override that service that takes that array and like starts injecting things. So I take that, and then I take the variables that I found, and I just start replacing them in those components as those components turn on, right? So I don't do it at the time the app starts. I do it when the component turns on. So if 99% of your components don't turn on until you go to that route, that's when I'm going to replace those variables in line for all browsers, right? But I have an if check to say, if you're in something else, just do the thing, okay? So let me show you this working. So you can see right here, all anchor tags are going to turn red if my thing actually works, right? Okay. This is like so stressful because who knows if it's going to work. All right. So let's start this up. Okay. All right. Whew, okay. So works in Chrome. All right. This is the stress. Let's come over here. Oh my gosh. Okay. So it works over there too, right? Okay. If you've never practiced a presentation that you're going to do live, you'll know how stressful that was, what I just did. Okay, so that was kind of amazing. Okay, hard part over. Now I just have to explain to you guys what I did, which might be crazy, and hopefully you guys can help me. Hopefully someone in here at least has some comments or some ideas of how I could polish this up. Because I don't think I have something I can ship. I think I have something that I can at least start iterating on, though. So let me show you the code.
Well, I was just going to say, this is important because we use AngularJS and we have a plugin that does
This thing? Yeah.
But does it build?
You do a build time. Yeah, and that was another thing I was aiming for, because who here owns their own Webpack build on an Angular app? Who here uses Angular CLI? Yeah, most people. So we can't really like, I'm not going to be like, hey, all you got to do is ng eject and not use the CLI anymore. Like that would suck. Like everyone would be like, all right, I shouldn't even come tonight. Like it was a waste of my time. So one of my important things was it can't have a build step because I can't modify the Angular CLI. True? Like none of us can. That's kind of the beautiful thing about it is the build's free, but we're kind of handcuffed on it, right? That's like a cool but bad thing. So I can't really modify my Webpack build to do this. Otherwise, I did it at my last job. It would have been so much easier. But I needed something that I could generally distribute that would work on projects generally. That makes sense? So, so that was what I tried to make happen. So this is a runtime step. This is not a compile time step. So, and it has an if for all the browser sends the IEs. They just go, man, we'll just do it the normal way. So let me show you guys this code. All right, let's get rid of that. So in the app module, we bring in the CSS host module, okay? That's all you have to do, is bring in the CSS host module. And that's all it took to turn the app on. So let me show you the CSS host module. So it's a pretty simple module. This is it right there. Doesn't have a lot. This is, I copied ends with function out of Lodash because I didn't want to install it and add another dependency to what I was working on, even though I don't think there's any problem with installing one Lodash function. But anyway, I wanted to keep it consolidated. So here's kind of the bastardized thing. Is Angular has this thing called DOM shared styles host. And that DOM shared styles host is basically an injector. Here, let me show it to you. This is, here, let me go bigger. It's basically this thing. And you have the shared styles host, right? But then you have the DOM version of it too that extends the shared styles host, because not all your shared style hosts are going to modify the DOM. Some of them are going to modify whatever Android has instead of a DOM, right? Like it's going to be something else, or maybe it's for universal, so it's just modifying a string rather than an actual DOM itself. So that's what this shared styled host is, and then the implement, and it has like some interfaces. This is an interface. You still have to implement it. So the DOM shared style host is the browser version of the shared style host. Okay, so that's what this is. And so it's got this thing that Angular has, and then because they don't trust us, rightfully so probably, when they ship this thing out to us, they put this weird O before the D, right? And because they don't want us to be able to find it. So instead of just providing the DOM shared style host, I have to provide whatever that thing is. It's called a bar Latin dash. Oh, bar Latin. No, is it? I don't know. I couldn't even find it. Like I don't even seriously. If you told me to type it, like if I hold down O, it's like not any of these things. So I don't know how to make them, right? Like if I didn't know that was there, I would have no idea. Like so, luckily I could talk to Rob and be like, bro, because I did this entirely different way where I hooked into zones. He's like, that's not efficient. Don't do that. I was like, cool. What should I do then? And we kind of came up with this override the DOM shared style host. Okay, so the DOM shared style host, what it is. So basically, I say take the one that you have, and instead of using that one, use mine. And I made this one called extended shared styles host. Okay, so this extended shared style host, that's mine. That's the one. This is the one that I made. Probably deserves a better name, but that's all it is, because I am just extending the original one. So we kind of walk you through what's happening here. So I take the document from the app, and I just inject it and make it private to myself. And then you have to implement this onStylesAdded function. This is one of the things you have to do. My parent class, the DOM shared styles, it has one of these. So I really just needed to intercept it and then pass it back up to the parent. So if you see down here, I call back up to the parent eventually, but I have to intercept it first. So the first time through, you can see it's true. So the first time through, I say it's not the first time anymore. Go to the head, get the style tags. For each style tag, pull the CSS out, parse the CSS out. I actually need to put this inside this if statement. Optimizing as I'm given the talk. Okay, it's just optimized. Perfect. Okay, so when it's the first call, so the first thing I check is CSS on the window, and does CSS support this thing? And it will tell you if it supports that thing, and if it does, you're good to go. So that's how I check to see if it's supported in this browser. So that's how I know if I can use CSS first, right? So if there was ever any weird, one-off version of Edge that was kind of in between, that's how I would tell. And so I say on the first call, go through the head, get all the style tags, parse out the variables, and all it does, it puts the variables into this vars map. The key is the -- var name, and the value is whatever the value was, okay? So I'm just parsing those out of the head tags. The next thing I do is I got to go back through, now that I've found the variables in the head, I got to go back through and replace the usages of those variables. Because it's great that they're declared, but they got to be used. So I got to replace them in line with the actual values of themselves. So I go through and I replace the variables, and then I set that inner text back on that tag, right? So that would be some massive repaint, reflow. So I don't want to do that in Chrome, Firefox, Edge, Safari, right? That's just something I kind of want to keep only when this is necessary. Because when you replace the inner text on a style tag, the browser has to reevaluate all the values, all the rules, all the selectors inside of that tag. So that's what I do. Normally on most apps, there's only going to be one thing up there. Okay, so that's the first thing that I do. The next thing that I do is I take this additions. Now the additions is all the things that you had in your styles URL, all those strings. I'm going to get that as an addition. Okay. Now, have you guys ever paid attention to those? How that CSS gets spit out? Like they put your specific on every single Angular component. They put a specific attribute specific to your component, and then they hijack all your CSS and like put that before all your selectors. So I get this string and it's already got all that stuff on it, right? So it's already been scrubbed to have those things in there, right? And at this point, all I really have to do is find usages of those variables again and replace them, right? So that's what I do. I parse each one, and the parse, in case anyone had any extra declarations in there, I'm going to parse those back out, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to replace them. Sorry, I'm going to replace them. And then once it's replaced, it gives me a string back. I just put that string back into this set, and then I pass it back up to the parent and say, whatever you were going to do with this string before I got here, just do that with these new strings that I've replaced the variables for it. That makes sense? I'm going to walk you through the code a little bit, the parse, because I don't know if it's good. I just know that it works for the demo. Yeah.
So at the point where you run through this, are you even using the CSS variables anymore? Because if you're scrubbing all of their variables inside of their component styles, why not just replace it with the value of the CSS?
That's what I am doing. So I have to, first, in case they have any extras, like let's say someone's silly and they like declared a new variable inside their component, right? Well, I have to go ahead now and I have to pull that into my values, and then I have to do the second step, which is find any usages and replace them with the actual salmon, right? So that's what I have to go back through and do. So I do both steps, one on the header and then one on each component as they init. Does that make sense? And I haven't really like life cycle hooked this to know if this is happening before the constructor of the component or after the construct. Like I don't really know where this is happening, but it's when things are turning on at this point. That's all I know, right? So let me walk you through the parse variables, because that's the first thing it does on each component, and it's also that's what it does on the links in the head, and that's what it does on the component styles themselves as well. So this was a debug statement. Sorry. Okay, so I parse out the CSS using this parse function from a library that does something kind of like what I wanted to do, but it didn't have the edge case for Angular components with that custom selector that Angular puts on every component. So I just pulled that function out of their library. It's called CSS vars ponyfill. Has anyone ever heard of it? It's pretty cool. So I pull their function out, and it basically takes this string of CSS and parses it into a tree. Okay, so it gives me like an abstract syntax tree of the CSS. And then I go through it, and I look at each rule, and if the selector has root, meaning they were trying to add more things, then I go ahead and they're trying to add more variables, then I go through and pull those back out and put those into my map of variables. I don't know if that's a good idea. What do you guys think?
Tell us more.
I don't know what else to say. Like I'm kind of at the end of what I know about that step. So let me tell you a little bit more. Okay, I got a little bit more. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but like if you have a component called app component or donuts component, and you put a CSS rule in your styles, in your inline styles. So over here, let's replace this real quick with so if I say .foo, font size, 100 px. The Angular compiler, I don't know what to call it. The thing that like makes Angular happen. It goes through this string that I just made, and it says there's no foo in his template. Like it's going to go through this template like there's no .foo, and it's going to remove that rule. So that rule actually won't get shipped. Okay, so it strips that out. So that's one more thing you should know. So if I do this to match my code, my interceptor is going to intercept that before it gets removed and put that into my map. Okay, but it's actually not going to get put into the DOM. Like that value isn't going to get put into the DOM. Like the Angular thing's going to remove it, but it's there long enough for me to grab it and put it into my override, my global override. Does that make sense? So it doesn't really make sense to do. I'm not sure if it makes sense to do this because I see people waving. I don't know what's happening. Because if you tried to do this, Angular's going to remove it for like Chrome, so it wouldn't make sense to do this for IE11. But I was trying to figure out a way to like keep this around, and the only way I could figure to keep it around was ngDeep. If you put ngDeep before a rule, that's how you tell the Angular thing that removes things that aren't present to just leave it like we know it's not there. So if I did that, yeah.
So you can put :root in a component CSS style anywhere in your application and add to the global styles.
No. The way that CSS variables work going forward, wherever the link, well, actually, yeah, because what Angular, I mean, it depends. I guess it depends on what mode you put Angular in.
Sorry, I'm referring to your module.
To my thing.
It's checking for the :root in all components and adding those styles to the.
For all browsers, yes. But like, let me give you an example of where this wouldn't work. Like, so if you turn on, has anyone ever used the view encapsulation setting in their Angular component? Okay, that's kind of how you say use Shadow DOM or emulate Shadow DOM or don't even try. Like it's kind of a way to give you a Shadow DOM-esque like thing. If you tried to turn that on, it's not going to put your style tag for that component in the head. It's going to put it inside your component because that's how web components are supposed to work, and the style is supposed to live in the component, and then anything you declare there would only be accessible from there on down. It wouldn't be global. That makes sense? So it's going to, again, this isn't perfect. Like I'm not even checking what encapsulation mode we're in on this component, right? But if I did, I'd have to be like, if you're in this encapsulation mode, do something different maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, to your point.
Well, I mean, but it introduces potential problems in the application, right? Where if somebody down the line, 10 files in, creates global style and tries to refer to it in another file, you end up having a race condition, right? Where this file gets parsed first, this one doesn't.
Yeah, totally. Or if two people call their variable font size.
Right, unless you're re-scrubbing all of them again.
Yeah. So I mean, it would have to. I mean, it needs a little bit more work to your point, right? But it's a rough go at something that I think it could be close to being ready to go. So yeah. So that's kind of what this is doing. Let me go back to this host module. Okay. So if it sees that there's a root, go ahead. It adds the vars to the global to the rule set that exists that it can then replace from. And then what it does is it replaces the variables. After it parses the variables out, it replaces the variables in that string. So let me walk you through that code. And this one's just a little bit of regex foolery. Any regexers? Okay. So it takes the CSS string, calls replace on it, and it passes it this regex. Okay. This is my attempt at writing a bulletproof regex. I'm looking for some feedback. Feel free to email it to me later. All right. So that's what this is. So I say replace using this regex, and then just replace it with that value from the vars map. That's all it does. So, and then it gives that string back up to whatever Angular was already going to do with that string. It just gives it back to it. Again, all this only happens if this statement fails. If CSS variables are not supported, this is the only time this is going to happen. So yeah, thank you. Okay, that makes sense. What's happening then? I don't know if it was a good idea. Seems like a great idea. If you guys knew you could use CSVars today without any like repercussions, would you start using them? Like, does anyone see values over these over sassvars? I see values over sassvars. Does anyone else? Like, what are the values you guys see over sassvars? Yeah. Yeah. Seriously, right? Yeah, if you don't need it. I mean, the whole use the platform people sometimes abuse the use the platform hashtag, but I mean, it does make sense to use it when you can, right? So, yeah, I agree.
I mean, if CSS was smart and just put in everything Sass has.
Yeah. If I had like functions and stuff. I saw a couple other hands. What? Go ahead. Yeah, it just works out of the box. Yeah. You had, your hand was up. Having an impeccable memory. All right. Yeah.
Would you find doing it this way as the complete replacement for Sass or less, or would you just depend on the application?
It would be a replacement for your variables in Sass and less. Okay? So, like here's the thing. Like, have you guys ever used like fancy like multiplication variable generators in Sass? It's like if you want like a margin of 1 through 20, and you just write a few lines of code and you have 20 new selectors that are in your Sass file. Like, it makes it really easy to bloat it up real quick. Yeah, let me show you this real quick. I'll show you kind of an example of like something that I think is weird that you can do. New window. Hello, come on. Oh, thanks for putting it up there. Okay. Grid. It's like this thing right here. For I from 1 to 20, make these things. And then it just goes through and it creates a bunch of like grid margin, top, bottom, left, right, all variables that have a thing between 1 and 20, and I can just use those classes randomly when I want some sort of margin between 1 and 20, right? Like, so you can't replace this. This isn't replaceable with CSS vars, okay? But if you're doing simple things like this with Sass, totally replaceable with CSS vars, right? And this goes big into theming and a lot of the other object-oriented CSS that people try and throw into their apps. You can get away with custom properties, and arguably this isn't even good. Arguably this is a bad thing. Like, some people like this, other people would be like, this sucks. So I mean, it just kind of depends. So I mean, think about with like 20 lines of code, how many lines of CSS did we just add? Like freaking 20 times 20, 400? Like, that's crazy when you think about it. So
Brett Little, he gave a really good talk a few years ago here at TEDS about why he chose the CSS variables instead of Sass.
Sass, yeah.
It's really cool.
I mean, look at that. That's 400 variables right there. There's 400 lines of code that you're shipping in production. And the class name is grid-margin-top-bottom and then some number. So it's like these are big class names. It's growing your CSS. So I don't know. I mean, it's not an end. It's not a hey, I answered all your Sass problems. It might be that, but it's not inherently like I fixed everything. All the things you needed Sass for are replaced now. Like, that's it. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, yeah. Good question though. Any other thoughts or angst? Did this cause anyone angst? That's really what I'm looking for, because the internet will show me plenty of angst, and that caused you angst.
Just hear you would say the word 8.
Oh.
Adds 10 to the stress level.
Oh, but not because I was like being derogatory. Just hearing the word causes you angst.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. I thought I had like done something to cause you. Okay, cool. TypeScript? Come on, TypeScript. Everyone likes TypeScript, right? Xbox, VS Code. I mean, we're in a room where Microsoft, GitHub. Too soon. LinkedIn. No, just kidding. All right. Yeah, there's plenty of Microsoft anymore. So yeah. Anything else cause anyone angst? I'm gonna try and. I know Rob's gonna spit this out, but I'm gonna try and see if we can't refine it and get this into production so that this can just kind of be one of those go-to things people start using in their apps. So, would you guys use this if this was available? Like if this totally worked, would you guys use this? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's my presentation. So if there's any more questions, I'll stay up. Otherwise, I'm done.